Welcome back to Worship at Home, week 26. This week, Ashley tells her story of the blessings and struggles of trying to have a child. Hope you enjoy. God bless.
Worthy is the Lamb. Hi guys, welcome to Louisiana. We are hanging out and we've been having a great week with our daughter Ashley and grandson baby James and son-in-law Nate. And Ashley, as some of you know, went through quite an ordeal over the last few years with trying to conceive. So she's just going to talk a little bit about her story and things that God has helped her come through. Hey, Ashley.
Hello.
So do you want to just start with, how it was after you and Nate got married and trying to think about having a family?
Yep, so in October of 2016, if I can remember right, we got married in New Orleans. And then it was no secret we wanted a family right away. So we tried. I think it was probably like a year in that I decided to just go see like a regular doctor and just kind of get a checkup and make sure everything was okay, and maybe it was just the wrong timing. So I saw a doctor, blood work was good, everything was fine at that point. They put me on some medicine to help me, ovulate on schedule, which was supposedly tried to help pregnancy happen maybe a little bit easier. The medicine I was on maybe like 2 or 3 rounds, and then, still nothing happened. And then in 2018, we decided to move to Louisiana. So we moved here and we arrived January 3rd of 2019. Could be wrong on that, but anyway, so we kept trying still in between the whole time. But when we moved here, I found a new GYN doctor, and they referred me to the Fertility Institute of New Orleans, which is here not far from the house, where I met my fertility doctor. And then he ended up running all of the tests, A through Z, and then found out that I don't ovulate at all naturally. So the whole, time that we had been trying on our own, it was never going to go anywhere. So he put me through a lot of rounds of exams, and then I started on my fertility shots, and that was very, very rough, but it worked. And so at some point during that time, I got pregnant with Joseph, and that was great. I mean, we were super happy, never had any doubts. They monitored me for 13 weeks and then set me free to my regular OB doctor. So then the treatments and everything continued, the monitoring and everything continued just at regular pace. Once I met a couple weeks in, they referred me to a high-risk pregnancy doctor because I have high blood pressure. And I met that doctor one time. I went in for initial scans and initial blood work, which showed that, my blood pressure was still elevated, but they were happy with the reading. It was still underneath of what they would consider critical value. So they set me free. And I just went home, and I just kept working. I didn't do anything different. I didn't eat different. I just thought it was great. It was on a weekend, and I was about 7 months in when I just wasn't feeling much that day. And I texted everybody that I would regularly text, my friends. I texted my mom. I texted just for my mainly reassurance. And at this point, it was getting pretty late into the night, and I had to work the next day. And my friend Kendra came over, who's a nurse, and she came over with her little Doppler. We were trying to find a heartbeat just so I could go to sleep that night and I could go to work the next day and not worry about the lack of movement. We tried probably for about an hour. I drank juice, we did all the crazy things to stimulate a movement, but we couldn't find anything. And I don't think even at that point anything clicked to me. So I went to my hospital that I was going to deliver at. I went to labor and delivery, and I told them the situation. And they put me on, the monitor and checked my blood pressure, and then they also tried to find fetal heart rate. So when I arrived at the hospital, Nathan stayed in the truck, and I went up to labor and delivery. And I told them exactly what was happening, and they assured me that it was probably nothing. So they checked on the Doppler, and they couldn't find anything, but they didn't say anything to me. They said they were going to call ultrasound. Ultrasound came over, and at that point, I think my heart rate was like maybe a little elevated at that point, because I was like, well, what's happening? Why is he so hard to find? And they did the ultrasound, but they didn't let me see the screen. So I was like, okay, that's weird. And it was a very fast scan. I just heard the sound of the machine, and then they walked out. And then when the nurse came back in, she told me that they had no heartbeat. I think that took, a little while to set in. At that point, it was about midnight. And I think I didn't process it. So my first reaction was I called into work because I was like, well, I'm not going to be at work the next day. I wasn't really understanding what they were saying. And then after that, instead of calling, my husband first, who's still downstairs in the car, I remember I called my mom. To me, it felt like, okay, they're wrong. I'm going to call my mom. It felt like when someone took something from you and I was upset, and I felt like, okay, well, I'm going to call my mom and she's going to make them give it back. So I called her, and it was midnight, and I told her what was happening. And I think maybe then it started to sink in. So we got off the phone, and I called Nathan, and he came up, and, told him, and I think we were both just shocked. We hugged each other, and we cried for a while, and then they told me they had a room for me. I still had no idea what that even meant. I had a child inside me that was no longer alive. But, I had the baby bump. I didn't have any signs. I didn't have bleeding. I had nothing. I had a nursery put together in my house, and I was 7 months pregnant. So to me, it never registered to me that was something that could happen. So it was in April. In April of 2020 is when Joseph was born. It was a very hard delivery. It felt numb. It felt like I had been trying for what seemed to be forever to have a baby. I spent countless overtime hours working so I could afford the medicine, and to me it felt how cruel that would happen to us. How I did everything right. I got married and moved to Louisiana, and it was a fluke that I didn't know I didn't ovulate, so I thought, okay, this is finally it. And then when it turned out to be not it, it felt mean. It felt very mean, and I stayed up that whole night when I delivered, and I just cried most of the time. I still didn't process any of it for a long time because I was very angry. I was very angry at God. I was very angry. It didn't seem like, they say that He doesn't give you anything you can't handle, but that was way more than I could handle in that moment. It just didn't seem fair. So, we went home. We had him cremated, and we brought him home. And then it just was like Groundhog Day for several weeks, maybe even months. I got to leave from work, so we stayed up most nights and went to sleep, but woke up a lot of the time, and I would cry because there's still postpartum you have to go through in those moments. I had hormones racing through me, but I didn't have the child to show for it. I had nothing but a nursery room, and I remember I made Nathan lock the nursery room so that I couldn't go in there, as if almost I wanted to try to forget. Eventually, I healed, and and we discussed maybe not trying again, because that was such a traumatic event. We thought, well, maybe we don't risk it. Maybe we go back to the drawing board and we just we just stop. We don't do anything, because how could something like that could have happened? But the diagnosis that they gave me was a 1 in a million kind of thing. They didn't have much of an answer for it, so we ended up trying again. We went back to the drawing board, went back to the Fertility Institute, and went back, and I did 4 more rounds. Every time the round that you get a negative or a positive pregnancy at the end. So, by the 4th round, they were like, well, Ashley, this is your last attempt before we would make you do, like, egg retrieval, like IVF and all of that stuff, which you're talking in a whole different price range at that point, a whole different ballgame of things I knew nothing about. It worked that time. I never announced my pregnancy. I never announced it to anybody outside of a very small circle of people, because every day, you live in fear that if you don't feel a movement or you don't feel anything on the Doppler, that you've lost your child again. And so it was such a hard pregnancy. I never allowed myself to get really overly happy. I started to pray again, but mainly I feel like I prayed out of fear. I thought if I did more, it wouldn't happen again. James was born June 14th of 21, 6/14/21. James was born very happy and healthy. He was, a little underweight, but, he arrived, and that was the biggest blessing in our lives, because I knew I did it once. I knew I could do it once. But if I look back and I think of all the things that Joseph's life taught me, it was so much more than I would have ever thought. His life taught me, love, how deep a mother's love could be for someone she's never even met yet. Taught me patience. It taught me to connect again with Nathan. I mean, when you have 2 people and you get married, you don't expect, they always say you go through everything together, but a loss of a child is something you don't ever prepare for. You don't prepare for it, and you don't repair from it. But we stayed together because we knew in that moment nobody would ever understand what that felt like. All the nights that we spent on the couch crying and being confused and everything. Is Joseph's life brought Nathan and I so much more together, because we felt like nobody would understand what that was. After James, a lot happened. Life got very busy, very crazy. You live in bliss. We've lived in bliss for a long time. He's a very happy and healthy boy. I tried again for a baby after James, and I did 3 rounds and got pregnant, and then had a miscarriage a couple weeks in. But I remember so vividly the day that this happened to me, the day that I had the miscarriage, because I was very calm. I was able to rationalize with myself and tell myself what this was. And on the day that I remember the miscarriage, I remember I called Nathan, and we were like, oh, well, it's okay. We just kept saying we still have James, and that's so true. We still had James. But I remember in that moment, I got down on my knees, and I just remember saying that it was okay. That I understood at that moment. So many things clicked for me. I understood both sides of it. I understood the love for an unborn child that I had never met, but I understood the love for my living child. I understood how God felt. He gave his one and only son. I understood how Jesus' mother felt, watching her only child die. I felt like I understood more the plan, that God did not make Joseph's life go. Like, he didn't let that happen. It happened, but he didn't leave me. I went through that and what felt like was very alone. I was not alone. I definitely think now, when I cried, he was crying. You know, it hurt him every bit as much as it hurt me. And I just feel like I remember, you know, the song "It Is Well With My Soul." That song that day, on the day of my miscarriage, brought me back to the day of Joseph. And I remember there's a phrase in it, and it was like, I can't think of it right now, but it, you know, it says it is well with my soul. But it talks about even in loss, even in stressful circumstances, I've learned to say it is well with my soul. And I remember I was sad for the miscarriage. We cried, but I remember not being so angry. I remember not blaming God. I remember saying, it's okay, I understand. I understand that that's the path you have me on. It's the path that could help other people. You know, infertility is not talked about. Loss is not talked about enough. But it's the path that he put me on. And I used to always wonder what my purpose was. You know, it sucks to say that my purpose was to be a mom with children in heaven and then a child with me. You know, at my age, to say that I have 2 children in heaven. But it's okay. You know, I understand, and I welcome the journey, and I still have a wild, crazy toddler that I get to raise in this life, and I'm beyond blessed for that.